Is just-in-time supply chain management dead?
This is a continuous improvement movement reserved for the few with the grit to prove it. Everybody claim, but the click exclusive. Many pursue, but it's too elusive.
We got an article from itsupplychain.com. The article is titled From Just in Time to Resilience: How COVID 19 and Other Disruptions Are Redefining Supply Chain Management. So, Calvin, can this article focuses heavily on how AI is helping change the supply chain environment? Can AI solve the problems that just in time created?
You know, that's a very interesting question. And this is the way that the article frames the conversation. It's almost saying JIT created a bunch of problems and now is positioning AI as the potential solution for all these problems that JIT created. The reality is that I've worked for some of the greatest supply chain and manufacturing companies on the planet, right? We're talking Mars, Nestle, Tyson, Clorox, and a bunch of others. And also AT Kearney is a management consultant, which is, heavily focused on supply chain analytics, right? The reality is that nobody was really, really, really doing textbook JIT. Everybody was doing a version or trying to get toward just in time in such a way that they could manage, right? Obviously, you gotta run your business in a way where it's cost effective, where you're making some money, but also you're satisfying the needs of the customer too. So even the best companies aren't doing pure JIT. So the framing in this article probably isn't exactly accurate. Let's just call it that. And JIT didn't necessarily create these problems. Companies were moving toward JIT by becoming more operations focused, driving out inefficiencies, driving out variation from their supply chain processes. In doing so, you move toward more of a JIT type of environment. But what happened with COVID is a once in a century event, right? And I don't know if the solution is to knee jerk to, oh, let's throw JIT out and the whole thinking behind JIT out because of a once in a century type of event.
Right.
Now, granted, they may be happening more and more frequently, but still, there's still a lot of science and psychology behind JIT that makes it something to aspire to, even if it takes you some time to actually achieve it.
Yeah, it's the ideal. It's just like the zero defects movement.
Absolutely,
It's something to work forward, and that makes you more efficient and more competitive.
absolutely.
So, due to all these things that happen, COVID and maybe political unrest and things like that, some other things that we have going on, do you think that we have moved beyond just in time?
Okay, that's a great question. The answer is no. I don't think we ever moved to just in time. So that's
We're still moving towards
we
just in
still have we
time.
never true no nobody's ever truly achieved just in time, in its ideal sense. I think it's something like you said to be aspired toward.
Right.
Um, it, the way this described in this article is almost as if companies just hit a switch and went to JIT. Well, the reality behind JIT is in order to get to a true single piece flow, just in time environment, you got to basically eliminate all supply chain disruptions and variability and unpredictability and uncertainty, right? Nobody's done that, right? Everybody's working towards that. And that is how you build a more resilient supply chain is by solving the problems that are causing the variation in your, from day to day management within your supply chain, right? Now, what I do like about AI is that it can look at more information. It can take more things in consideration, the weather, the politics, the right, and it can see the historical on how those things impact and assign a proper weight to those variables to get a little more accurate at forecasting, right?
And
Which
at speed, forecasting at speed.
and forecasting at speed. But you got to understand the only reason you need a forecast is because you can't make and deliver on demand.
Yeah,
If
that's a
you
good
can make and
point.
deliver on demand, you wouldn't need a forecast to begin with, right? You take the order, you turn around and deliver it immediately. And because companies can't do that, because their operations is had so many inefficiencies and unreliabilities, and there's a psychology behind JIT that I also think is not really spoken to, given the proper respect in this article. And that it's simple psychology, human psychology. The more of a buffer you have, the less likely you are to do the difficult thing, to work hard.
The more inefficient.
The more inefficiency is allowed to breed, right? And we can create more inefficiency. So you can look at inventory level as how much margin of error do we have? And high inventory means I have a high margin of error. So let the errors fly. Let the mistakes fly. Let the issues fly. Let's not make the investment to fix those issues. We don't have time for that right now, right? We have such big inventories. Why deal with the operations issues that are keeping us from really performing at a world-class level? Now, when you have low inventory levels, which is kind of what just-in-time is pushing you toward gradually over time, right? You have a very low margin of error. You don't have room for mistakes. You don't have room to just let it go. We'll deal with it later, maybe never, right? People not showing up for work, people letting issues plague them for months on end. You just don't have room for that if you have low inventory levels. So you got to understand the psychology. Like maybe there's a trade-off, right? Yes, there's a potential for disruption. Pandemic was once in a century, right? There is that potential. There's always that potential. But you got to balance that against the harm, the psychological harm you're doing to your organization by keeping massive buffers, right? So the question then becomes, can AI help with that, right? Can AI help to identify the exact right buffer level?
So, given all these factors, Calvin, how do we manage supply chain more effectively?
I think that's the golden question, right? Because, like I said, everybody who aspires to JIT, and I still think every company should aspire to JIT, right? Even if you got the best analytics capabilities on the planet, you still should be aspiring to minimizing inventory levels and running a very efficient operation.
Producing
right?
on demand.
Producing on demand. So if you're using AI to help you do that, then I think you're doing well for yourself and for your company and for your people and your customer too. But here's a framework on how to think about inventory and how to manage it. Okay, and I'm gonna try to do this. I may mess this up, but I'm gonna try to do it right. So I used to be a net contents manager at Nestle, right? And my job was to make sure we never crossed the minimum level of protein, which is on the label, on the box. You have to have a minimum level of protein legally. So if you got this level, let's call it 10 grams of protein, and your machine has a certain amount of variation, right? On one dispense is going to go down, on another dispense is going to go up, right? So every time you get a low output, you kind of broke the law, right? Every time you give a high output, you just gave away a bunch of protein, right? So it's costing you. So if this is the amount of variation from output to output, in order to make sure you stay above the minimum level, you got to target higher. So you're up in here, right? So you never cross below that minimum, right? Inventory works very much the same way. The more variability you have in your supply chain and ability to predict, you got to aim for higher inventory so you never cross below that minimum and you can keep your customers satisfied, right? Now, in a situation like COVID, where normally it's this is how much unpredictability, uncertainty, variability you got in the process. Normally it's this, you got a COVID situation, now it's like that, right? Now you're dropping below the minimum. Now we got toilet paper shortages, right? So what do you got to do?
Aim even higher.
You got to aim even higher, right? Now you're way up here and you're trying to operate like this. So in what JIT is saying is figure out what's causing this big wide swing and variation and chip away at it. So you got lower and lower variation. And when you got lower and lower variation, again, this difference here, the average and the target is just cost you're giving away, right? It's just eating you up cost-wise. So what you got to do is you chip away at that variation so you can bring your target down closer to, your requirement. and now you're operating in here with a very tight target. This is what JIT is trying to do psychologically.
Yeah.
This is the psychology of JIT, right? And a lot of lean tools, visual management, 5S, 5Y. Yeah, it looks good, it's pretty, it's all that, but you got to also be doing it with the intent to drive the psychology for operational excellence. And operational excellence is kind of it's probably more psychology than it is the technical aspects of making changes on the shop floor. So so that's what JIT is trying to do, basically. So how do you manage a supply chain? I think you still push for using the concepts of JIT and some of the other lean tools to minimize inventory levels. If you're going to employ technology like AI, I think, like I said, AI can help to predict better than manual systems. Don't get me wrong, you've got forecasting analysts who have been doing these predictions forever, right? But they can only take a finite number of factors in consideration. They can only take, applying the proper weights to those factors, right? AI can bring a level of automation to that process that's traditionally done manually, and maybe get you to a better mode of prediction. But real perfect world scenario, you wouldn't be forecasting at all. You would be ready to produce when the order comes in. You satisfy it and ship it on demand.
I agree. I love it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, is just in time dead? What do you think after this conversation? Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again tomorrow. For daily news on operational excellence and how it relates to current events, check us out on the Ticket to Freedom podcast.
Simply subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay up to date on the latest developments in continuous improvement.